Hello, Tungsten Miner here. I have been at work, as you can see, on a new structure. This one actually is just across the valley a little ways from my primary dwelling, but this is my powerhouse. And as you can see, I'm using an Immersive Engineering water wheel to drive some power. But of course, as this mod pack has become, this is also an exercise in learning more about chisels and bits. So obviously, you can see the water mill here. These are 3 water wheels that are attached to a kinetic dynamo inside the house. And above it is just a bunch of water source blocks going across this little bridge, aqueduct, whatever you want to call it, and then pouring out the end. So really the source blocks are those last 3 blocks at the top there, and everything else is flowing water, comes down and around. One important thing to know about this thing here, let's just make a little bridge, is you get power from these water wheels everywhere a flowing water block comes in contact with the wheel, and that includes the bottom. And it's counteracted by having water going the wrong way around. So, yeah, not surprising, it's going to slow it down. So, I've got source blocks up here, which means the next block that touches is a flowing water block, and then another one, another one, another one, another one, and then down here, I don't want the flowing water block to miss this little corner, so I actually have this same shape just down there in the bottom. You can't quite make it out with all the water texture and whatnot, but that does cause the flowing water block to be right in contact with the wheel again, and then obviously going across back through this little channel, all the flowing water blocks continue past the end of the water wheel. So the entire front half, if you want to think of it that way, of the water wheel is in contact with flowing water blocks. Just a second, let me take a nap here. Okay, back again, and that's what makes the power. Now, I do have 3 of these water wheels, and if you haven't used Immersive Engineering before, we can just take a really quick look. Water wheel, there we are. They are made of a steel ingot with these water wheel segments. The water wheel segments are just treated sticks and treated wood. The treated wood itself comes from... the recipe's not in here, that's too bad. But you just take regular wood planks and surround them with a bucket of creosote. And the creosote itself, we'll actually take a look at where that comes from in just a minute. But yeah, it's from a coke oven. I'll show you how the coke oven works. So anyway, let's finish up talking about the power aspect of things here. You can see on the outside edge here an LV capacitor, which is the lowest grade of power storage that Immersive Engineering offers you. The LV capacitor, pretty easy to make, just some treated wood and a bunch of metal, and a teeny tiny bit of redstone. Inside here, we've got the back side of the kinetic dynamo. And I say the backside because one of the important things here, I'm just going to turn it around for a second. You can see this face has this kind of round circular pattern. Well, it doesn't generate power if you've got it facing the wrong way around. So this circular pattern has to face the thing that moves. Because you can also plug these into windmills. I like the water wheels better. They're a little bit easier to make, actually, and they produce a lot more power. So I'm just going to right-click that twice with my engineer hammer. Which is just this right here, and that's going to turn it back around again. And now I'll be generating power. Connected to this is an LV wire connector. LV wire. So the connectors are the ones that attach to a device, and then relays are a bit cheaper to make, right? So, whoops. These guys require 3 copper and 2 hardened clay, whereas these guys require a little bit less of everything. But these things can't attach to a machine to draw power out or put power in, whereas these things can. So if you're just moving power along power lines or power poles, these are the ones you want to make because they're cheaper. But if you're moving things in and out of a machine, these are the ones you want to make because they actually connect. I made that mistake this time around because it didn't used to be this way. In the last version of Immersive Engineering I used, there wasn't a distinction between the relays and the connectors for low voltage. There was for high voltage, but not low voltage. So that has changed. In case you're used to using this mod, you'll have to be attentive to that. In the middle here, I've got a current transformer. Current transformer, that's this guy. This is going to take your voltmeter and your other components here, copper coil block, which is just copper wire and an iron ingot, and this is made with copper wire itself. And it's actually a little bit harder to make in this newest version of Immersive Engineering, because you actually have to flatten out this copper plate, which can be done in a compactor, it can be done in a metal press. It can also be done, although you can't see the recipe here, just by crafting a copper ingot with your engineering hammer. And that's going to use a little bit of durability from the engineering hammer and make you a copper plate, and then you take the copper plate and craft it together with your wire cutters, and that will get you the wire. So it took 16 ingots of copper, because there's one ingot for one copper wire coil. So yeah, one ingot transforms to one plate transforms to one wire. You need 4 wires, but you get 4 of these coils. So it's basically 1 copper ingot per one of these. You need 8 of them per coil, which means, of course, you need 16 total. Plus 2 chunks of iron, and whatever you need to make this guy, which is yet another copper ingot. So this is not a cheap machine, but what it does, and unfortunately this battery is full, so I can't really demonstrate it properly, but if you put it in combination, in series in the circuit, and right-click on it, it's going to tell you how much power has been transferred, on average, over the last second, or over the last 20 ticks. Now this says 0. Why is that? Well, this is producing power, but this can't accept anymore. You can see it's all filled up. So the amount that has transferred is 0. The amount that's generated is not 0, but it can't go anywhere. So the transfer rate is 0. What ultimately I'm going to do, of course, is put in some power lines and have this go back up to the main house. And that will draw the power out of this thing. So when I come down here, I should expect to see how much energy is actually getting produced by right-clicking on this. Very good way to figure out how well your setup is working. You should expect to get, I think, around 55, 56 RF per tick from a Kinetic Dynamo with 3 water wheels attached to it that are set up properly. But if you don't have your water flowing correctly, you might get less than that. And so that's a really good way to make sure that you're getting what you expected. And now that this thing is set up, and I'm pretty confident that it's working as I want it to, I could pretty much just take this thing out, right, and connect this relay directly, or that connector directly to that connector, and just take this guy out of the middle, because I don't actually need to know what the flow rate is, because well, 0 at the moment. Not very helpful. Anyway, so that's the power situation here. The next step, obviously, is to run some power lines back up to the house so I can use the power. But let's talk about this building for a moment. Obviously, this is being done with Chisels Bits, my new favorite mod. On the bottom here, I've just got full-size 1 meter by 1 meter gneiss bricks, so underground biomes. I then inset this one by just 2 bits, so that you have this kind of effect of a building sitting on a foundation. I then inset the rest of this by a further 3 bits, and then placed 1 bit's worth of brick on this wall. So I happen to have a chunk of the wall over here. So when I plop this guy down, you can see what I've got. Here's the 1 meter square that it's sitting on. So on the inside of the building, I likewise carved off 2 bits. On the outside of the building, I was already 2 bits in. I carved off another 3 and then added back this layer of brick. So I can make really, really efficient use of the fairly expensive to make clay brick and do the whole building with only a couple of blocks worth. I mean, it's like maybe 10 blocks worth of clay brick in this whole building. Very, very efficient. I copied the style that's a pretty common style, I guess, for doing this sort of factory-ish sort of building in Britain and in New England in the United States, which has this kind of larger stone brick corners with the clay brick walls to give it a kind of finished sort of look to it. And then the same thing for the window sills, is to have them made out of that same sort of brick. The steps are just more chisels and bricks, just to make a little step there. this door is kind of a problem because it's a regular Minecraft door which wants to be exactly on a 1 meter boundary. So I extended the wooden door frame out by a total of 4 bits to get it to line up with the edge of a meter and still not look too weird. And then I extended this guy likewise. You can see here's the part that's inside the 1 meter that the door is in, and then here's a little bit extra to make it look like it overhangs the door just a bit. Inside, I've inset each of the rooms by 2 bits. So you can see there's 1 extra bit there, plus I was able to add a little bit of flashing around the floor and the ceiling, just to kind of make it feel more like a regular room. If you look around your house, you've probably got this stuff on, the edges of the floor and maybe even the ceiling too, although not always on the ceiling. The windows themselves have a little bit of an extension here, a little bit of a windowsill, and then on the outside it's just the stone. And they're framed with a little bit of wood. And the frame is inset so that this makes up 8. And then here you can see I've got some wooden paneling, just a tiny little strip across to give the impression of these nice tall windows. And you can see this one is on the left side of the meter. This is in the center, and this is on the right side. So the windows actually aren't 3 identical sets. They're each of them a little bit different. My ladder here is just the same material, this black granite that I like so much for simulating wrought iron. And what I did is I made little stands that are 8 bits tall, and then made a little cap, and then extended backwards and went up another 8 bits, and then a cap. And of course the player can step up automatically anything that's 8 bits or less, or half a block or less. And so as I walk my character into the ladder, he climbs the ladder. And as I walk back down, he slides back down the ladder. So using chisels and bits, I was able to make a very realistic ladder that actually works in the game to allow me to climb up and down to this top floor here. The top floor is more of the gneiss bricks all around. Actually, let me take a nap again. This is getting dark enough where we can't really see. Just a sec. So as we can see, this actually does look rather like an attic sort of space. We could see from the outside that the roof had a very smooth contour, and in fact it's the same contour on the inside. If I grab where there is this and break off a bit of the roof there, you can see the roof is actually just what it looks like. It's 3 bits thick with a thin layer of a darkish gray stone on the top. I think slate or shale or something. And that's it. That's how the whole thing works. So the whole roof is made that way. And of course I started off by putting down just a bunch of dirt blocks in a rough shape, and then refined that by making 1 slice worth of the roof all the way up and down. And then used my positive chisel design to copy all of that and then just extend it off in each direction. The windows at either end here are done using basically the same circular technique that I used back up at the main house, except obviously on a much smaller scale. And then the slats in the middle are just 2 by 2 in the middle here, and then 1 by 1 for the rest of them. And then this is just plain old glass that I carved up into bits. You can see the aqueduct behind me here. Also chisels and bits. Let's go out there and take a look at that. You have to be a bit more careful with this ladder because the character's not glued to it, and it doesn't work for just being in that 1 meter square. You actually have to slow yourself down. It's kind of, in a sense, a lot more like a real ladder that way. So the aqueduct begins with just this little tunnel that actually stops right about here. I'm pretending as though it's tapping into some kind of aquifer or groundwater, something like that for the sake of realism. But, in actuality, there's nothing really back there. It's all for appearances. And in fact, the water wheels don't care how much water source blocks are nearby. They only care about the flowing water. So yeah, here's the roof. Get a look at it from the top. And I decided to go with a fairly steep pitched roof. This is a 45-degree or 1-to-1 pitch. Roofs normally aren't quite this steep unless you're someplace where you get a lot of snow. But I like the look of it, so I just kind of stuck with that. And then over here, more chisels and bits. I took jungle planks. It's easy wood to get a lot of. And I left a 1 by 3 meter cross section available. So these water source blocks are just regular Minecraft water source blocks. And these walls are actually on the outside of the 1 meter. So here we can see, here's a grass block, and you can see those walls are cutting into it just a bit there. And the same thing on the bottom. The bottom of this thing is actually 1 in the next meter down, so you can kind of see how the floor is in this, interrupting this block down here. So the whole thing makes it so that I can have just plain old water source blocks here. Because of course, Chisels and Bits water blocks don't produce flowing water blocks as a result. So I needed to have actual water source blocks and this last little chunk of the aqueduct in order to produce the flowing water blocks I needed for powering the windmill. And that's how I got that. Let's see, yeah, this just goes straight back into the mountain here. Okay, so let's go back up to the house and take a look at that coke oven before we jump on to another subject. Okay, here we are back at the house. My family here has been growing quite a bit. So Elmira, whom I don't remember asking to join my household, has joined my household. She got married to Damien, who was another child of another couple that I did ask to join my household. She has given birth, I think, to Robin here. Yeah, Damien and Elmira. And she obviously has another child in her hand there. So this is Damien, who's a farmer, apparently. And Ralph is one of my guards, and Trish is the leather worker, who's the first villager I invited to join my house here. So Damien is their son. There's Trish over there. And yeah, so my house is kind of turning into a little bit of a village without me really trying to do much about it. So it's actually kind of cool. I know all these different folks have their different jobs and whatnot. So over here, I've built myself both a Immersive Engineering coke oven, and I've built myself an Immersive Engineering blast furnace. Finish up that little bit of iron there. Coke ovens and blast furnaces in Immersive Engineering are pretty low-tech affairs. Coke, brick. You just need some sandstone, some brick, and clay, and then that gets you these blocks. You need to repeat this recipe 9 times in order to get all the blocks you need to make the actual coke oven. And then once you've got it put together, you just right-click it with your engineer's hammer to turn it into the multi-block. It's not one of those that notices automatically that it should transform itself. The blast furnace works basically the same way, except the recipe is a little different. Blast furnace. So blaze powder, brick, and nether brick instead of clay and sandstone. You can upgrade this thing by using some of your steel to reinforce the blast brick, and that gets you a coke oven that basically allows you to automate it. So this one here, you can't pipe ingredients in or out. You just have to come and tend to it manually, whereas the upgraded version actually is a bit more fancy. I actually do have a mod spotlight on Immersive Engineering. It's a version behind what I'm using now, but the coke oven and the blast furnace work the same way as far as I can tell. All right, the last thing to talk about for this video is some new stuff with the roads. So I've shown a bit of the roads so far, and I'm just going to jump on my horse here and run off to the section that's actually new. So talk to you in a second. Okay, so last time I believe I left off not having finished this road yet. So this is a village, let's just take a look at the map here, that is a little bit to the south and east, rather, of my house. So here's my house. I just came down here. And now the road is going to go off to the south and kind of wander in and amongst a bunch of different hills, down into a little bit of a valley where one of my friends had made her first house, and then off past another village, and finally to the southernmost point of interest where another one of my friends has made his house. So cruising along here. Basically the roads are all made of 3x3 chunks using the excavator, and when I need to go at an angle like this, I make a 3x3 chunk and then offset by 1, and then dig out another 3x3 chunk and offset by 1, and just keep at it. And using the chisel here, I fill it in with, let's see, is this even going to work? Yeah, great. I fill the hole back in with this reinforced dirt. And that's one of the connected textures in Chisel. So what you wind up with is this nice dirt path that seems to have these darker sort of boundaries on the edges. Yeah, and down here we're just kind of descending into this valley a bit. Yeah, and you can obviously tell where somebody's been busy planting fruit trees and crops and putting down torches and so on. I've decided for this road system in this world, there's going to be no hard corners. Every corner is going to be rounded just a bit. Actually, let me take a nap here. Right, so what we've been seeing so far is wherever the road has to change directions, I first have it proceed at an angle for a while and then keep going. At any place where there's a T intersection, I kind of round off the corners a bit. I admit I was tempted to do something interesting with Chisels and Bits, but roads are really, really long, and they take a long time to build, and they would take forever to build if I was doing something complicated. Yeah, so here's an example where I needed to change directions. So I just have a quick little angle before I move on to the new direction. And finally, we're getting to the southernmost part of the island here. Here I wanted to change direction 90 degrees, but I still have just the tiniest little segment of a curve here. And a bit of an angle. And so here we're arrived at where one of my friends is just getting started with his house. And obviously a very ambitious project here. He's got himself set up with some water wheels. That little hut down there is kind of what he built himself to get started with. One thing I didn't realize, but apparently he did, is that you can now make Tinker's Construct smelteries of whatever size you want, so long as the pieces are all there, and it's a complete thing. And he's also gone and made himself a coke oven. Wouldn't be surprised to find that he's made himself a blast furnace before long. These arches here are not Chisels and Bits. They're actually the Architecture Craft arches, which he likes better. He likes that perfectly round shape as compared to the almost round or semi-blocky-ish kind of shape. I think these are still a work in progress. I'm not sure what his intention is to block them up and just kind of make them free power, or to try and make them more realistic, or have some kind of, I don't know. I'll be curious to see where he decides to go with that. Yeah, and here you can see the architecture blocks again. So that's his place he's getting started on. And that is about it, I think, for this time. I'm obviously going to carry on with getting that power back to my house from my water wheel. And that's going to be, I think, immersive engineering, low voltage power wires. And I'll probably do something that combines the wooden post from Immersive Engineering with some Chisels and Bits stuff to make kind of an interesting base for those things to sit on. Or maybe I'll just try something with Chisels and Bits and see where that gets me, and just use those relays to actually connect the wires to. In any case, though, that'll be my next project, and then we'll see. Maybe I'll try to get some interesting machines going and use some of that space in that big building there. Or maybe I'll pick up some farming with AgriCraft next, because my food supplies are getting a little bit low. Anyway, If you like the video, go ahead and hit like. If you want to know when that next video is ready, hit subscribe. And I will talk to you later.